Most of you have heard of Dr. Klinghardt. He is a scientist of our age, really digging in for answers in today's epidemics. And I have to say, he's always on the cutting edge. Many people have said, you and Dr. Klinghardt have to get together more and more. So our teams brought us together in this interview, and you're going to hear some of the most exciting things that of our time that you are going to get to benefit from. And you're also going to hear some surprising things that we resonate on. What about all this genetic testing and SNP testing? What about all the microbiome testing? Well, you're going to have to watch this episode to hear our responses. And what is the greatest threat of our day and age? And what can you do about it? Well, you're going to have to hear from one of the greatest scientists today doing some of this research on this episode of Cell TV. Stay tuned. I want to give thanks to one of our sponsors, CytoDefend. Look, at a time like this, I think that our immune system and keeping our immune system up right now is more important than ever. I can also tell you that I pay attention to the things that keep my immune system on par and healthy. So glad that CytoDefend is one of our sponsors here on Cell TV. And it's a product that I use, my family uses, and hopefully you'll check it out. And by the way, you can check it out with the link right here below. If you want to try a free bottle, you can actually get a free bottle, just pay the shipping. And I think you'll reorder after that, but check it out.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing CytoDefend product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit freeimmunity.com. Again, that's freeimmunity.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cellular Healing TV. I'm Ashley Smith, and today we welcome Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, who is founder of the Sophia Health Institute. Dr. Klinghardt is internationally known for his successful treatment of chronic pain and illness and has contributed significantly to the understanding of metal toxicity and its connection with chronic infections such as Lyme. He is considered an authority on this subject and has been instrumental in advancing various fields within biological medicine. We are such huge fans of his work and are excited for this opportunity to have him on Cell TV. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Klinghardt and, of course, Dr. Pompa to the show. Welcome, both of you.
Yeah, nice meeting you guys.
Yeah, no, Dr. K, that's what your staff calls you. I like that. I thought it was very affectionate. So anyway, it's just such a pleasure to be here today. And you and I have, we're out there lecturing in this world on detox. And gosh, so many times people come up to me and say, gosh, you and Dr. Klinghardt really need to talk. You guys really resonate on a lot of these topics and same subjects. But today I want to focus on Lyme. I said I haven't done a show on this in a while, but you and I have a lot of the same feelings around Lyme. And I want to bring out our strategies. Well, I want to bring out your strategies. I can share mine anytime. I want to bring your strategies to my viewers and listeners and your thoughts about Lyme. So thank you for being here, and let's crush it. Actually, I had to stop you right before the interview because I'm like, no, that's great. You started talking about Lyme and the kind of this history about where Lyme started in Connecticut, but how it's different than some of the other strains today. I'll let you share that, but let's open this conversation wide open right now. So go at it. Finish your thought.
Yeah, so what brought Lyme into the public consciousness was a strain of Lyme that caused severe illness, starting in the 70s and moving forward from there. And it really did start in Lyme, Connecticut. And it's just almost a miracle that we had some very, very smart, intelligent physicians there who realized that was different from what they've seen before, and that they called the right people on the plane to actually diagnosed that whatever people were made sick by was in fact an infection. And so, however, Klinghardt comes to America in 1982. I had a full working knowledge of Borrelia infections and the impact on neurological illnesses. That it was very well known in Germany that many psychiatric and neurological illnesses were caused by chronic infections. In fact, was very well known in the Third Reich and used by the destructive forces of Hitler. You know, he had already the first biological warfare lab where bugs were groomed for making large populations sick, and then they were sprayed on, via airplanes on large populations in the Ukraine and Russia and other places in order to bring the population down, just simply to weaken them, to make them tired, to make them fatigued. And as you know from some of the early books written, Lab 257 was one of them, but also now the more shocking insider report from Chris Newby, the book Bitten, reveals that the bug that escaped or was seeded on Plum Island, that actually went across the little small piece of ocean to the next town, which was Lyme, Connecticut, that those affected with that bug got very, very seriously ill. And the genome that has been cracked, the listeners should know that a regular bacteria, a very evolved bacteria, may have 15 or even 20 genes that would be a lot for bacteria. Now, the most intelligent bug until fairly recently was syphilis, that had somewhere around 30 genes. Come along like the first full genome that I helped co-paying in Germany on an American patient that we extracted the Lyme disease. His Lyme spirochetes had over 800 genes. And this is simply something that doesn't grow in nature. And there were sections of Epstein-Barr embedded into the Lyme gene and sections of mycoplasma. And that brings up the issue, when we diagnose people here and we do a test for mycoplasma and for the herpes viruses, and people are positive on all of these, the question is it actually separate bugs, or is it just one long bugs where different parts of the genome of other virulent bugs have been integrated? And so what we're dealing with really is two illnesses. We have the man-made lab-created version of Lyme spirochetes, which is very aggressive, causes very devastating illness, it's very hard to treat. And then there is the background of natural occurring Borrelia infections, which probably has always been there. We know that Ötzi, the Iceman, the man that was found in the Alps, in the Austrian Alps, he was 5,300 years in ice embedded, entombed, and he was full of Lyme spirochetes. But the variety that had only 27 genes, so it was an early culprit that was more intelligent than any other bug of that time, but not 800 genes. It's a big difference.
Right. Meaning the man-made one obviously being the 800.
And so among the Lyme literate physicians, this is not generally known. And people kind of think, okay, well, I have some hard cases of Lyme and I have some easy cases of Lyme. And what I'm proposing here is that the difference actually is that they're not the same illness. And so in terms of diagnosing Lyme, we've gone around the block with that. The Western blot was for a long time the gold standard here in the US. Now we prefer the test from Army labs. They use the lymphocyte transformation test, which is a more sensitive test, with a higher detection rate. And then there's some newer PCR-based tests that we've explored, and we're very, very successful having had a very, very sensitive test. But then the lab was visited by the FDA and told the lab that they're overdiagnosing Lyme disease, that they have to change their detection rate on the bar above which they're reporting. And so lab testing is still in its infancy, I would say, and the definitive diagnosis of Lyme really can be made with a biopsy. And so the leading pathologist with that was Alan MacDonald. He's still alive, he's still lecturing. He was brilliant. He did biopsies of people that died of Alzheimer's disease, and found the brain full of Lyme, living Lyme spirochetes. He did the same with autistic kids with their brains, and he did the same with virtually any neurological illness, and found not in just a small fraction of them, but in all of them, he found living Lyme spirochetes inside the myelin sheath of the nerves, happily living in there. And so we are operating here in this office under the assumption that everyone with psychological or psychiatric problems and everyone with any type of neurological problem should be suspected of having Lyme at the core of the illness, and that has served us very, very well. So based on that, we have developed our own approaches to treat the illness. You probably know.
Well, let's talk about that. And one of the things that I had said that I had found clinically in my group of doctors that I train and work with closely is that it's very difficult to get the Lyme out. It's intelligent, this bacteria, and it will find itself hiding from the immune system in and around heavy metals. And when we deal with the heavy metals, we can definitely go to a whole nother level. So what has your experience been with that?
Yeah, so of course it goes back a long way. So one of the cofactors of Lyme always was mercury. And it turns out that we observed a number of cases where we had patients' amalgam fillings removed because of testing, and people crashed really badly. And it turns out that a steady release of mercury from the dental amalgam fillings is actually a moderately successful treatment for Lyme disease, because Lyme suffers from the mercury just as our own cells do. And so that was a big discovery. And however, taking out detoxing mercury still is helpful because the immune system is damaged by it and inhibited by it. And so to get the immune system back on board, we need to sneeze.
Now Dr. K has the coronavirus. No, I'm joking. We were discussing that before this. If you watch this or listen to this, that will date this video.
I'm going to have a Corona beer tonight, and I'll be fine again.
I love it.
So the connection with Lyme and heavy metals or toxic metals in general is very complex, and so we know that Lyme only becomes treatable when we take the mercury away.
Yeah.
So that's an important part. But the other one that's also published is that one of the most important growth factors for Lyme spirochetes is aluminum. And so one of the big things that we do in the office here, we focus early on detoxifying aluminum from the brain and from the nervous system. And it has been a very rewarding.
And mercury and aluminum in the brain have this synergy that's very nasty, and so you have to deal with both of those, especially in the brain. And I find that's what a lot of practitioners fail to do, is really deal with it. Oh yeah, I did a mercury or a heavy metal detox, but you and I both know it. It takes time to get it out of the deep tissue, especially the brain. But therein lies the magic.
Yeah, and so that's really the secret to treating Lyme disease. I mean, the orthopedic form of Lyme disease is easy to treat. Where you may use antibiotics and some ozone injections in the joints and you're done. But if it's deep in the limbic system, you have to have a whole different approach to it. And it's always going to be a combination of detoxifying and then treating the infections and modulating the immune system. It's those three pillars.
I couldn't agree more. And we'll talk about some of your strategies here in a moment. But now part of the strategy, and I want to get to this. So the heavy metals and Lyme, there's a connection. Now a new problem, EMF. You've been very outspoken about the EMF connection with Lyme. And quote me, I mean, if this isn't what you said, then correct me. But you find it almost impossible, if not impossible, to get rid of Lyme unless you deal with these EMF exposures. Am I right on hearing you correctly?
Yeah, there's, of course, this gets into some complex findings. So first of all, the man-made electromagnetic radiation is affecting the microbes in our environment far more severely than it does our body cells. Our cells are pretty evolved and pretty stable. They do get affected, there's no question. But what gets mostly affected inside of us is our whole microbiome. All the living things in us are suffering. And so we know that Lyme and other bugs, also the molds, they're intelligent. And so when they feel threatened, they have embedded in the DNA certain sections that they can activate to basically turn into a poisonous beast that punishes the host if the host isn't nice to them. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Everything in life wants to live together, communicate, copulate with each other,
right,
and be in harmony with each other. And we have many patients that we found when we did the PCR testing. They had a high body burden of living Lyme spirochetes, but they were absolutely very dynamic, healthy people with a healthy outlook in life. And
absolutely, yeah.
And so it is not the microbes in us, it is the difference having happy microbes in us or upset microbes. And so the first step in turning the microbiome that we have, the entirety of all the bugs that live in us and with us, to turn them into happy bugs, the first step has to be to reduce the exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields. There is absolutely no question with that, and that has been the single most rewarding thing that we do in the office, that sets us aside from many other offices, that we don't just jam the antibiotics down the throat of the patients. We first of all look at the environment and how that is the driving force of the illness. And so, so that's step number one, is get rid of the electric environment to the largest degree possible. Step number two is, yes, the air that the patient breathes day and night. The home air is a huge important issue, and if it's full of mold and mycotoxins, it needs to be handled. And for that, we found a very inexpensive solution. It's a propolis vaporizer that at a certain temperature creates a monomolecular mist of propolis and leaves a very subtle, gentle aroma in the air. And these are particles that carry the highest negative charge, and they bind to any dust particle, but also to any mycotoxins. All the mycotoxins.
This is new to me. So therefore, how do my viewers and listeners, give us a little detail here, and I can have Ashley, put a link in. They can order that from your site. Let's.
The propolis vaporizer, that's an Italian invention, and it's sort of like invented by an old beekeeper and then passed on through several generations in Italy. And so
because propolis is from bees. I'm right. I mean, that's part of the honey that is the antibacterial part.
Yeah, well, it's the part that the bees are using to winterize the hive, to basically use it as this kind of concrete that they fill the gaps in the beehive. And it's antibacterial and very, very strong antiviral. In fact,
antifungal as well, as I
recall. For the coronavirus, it's probably the most effective tool is the propolis. But this is not about this. But to clean up the home environment, people need to have, at least in the Northwest, need to have the propolis vaporizer, and at least in the rainy months, it should be running 24/7.
So when you say a propolis vaporizer, so is it a regular vaporizer that you put propolis, a liquid propolis into?
Yeah, there is small cartridges pre-made. This organic, biodynamically grown, educated bees, and so it's a fantastic, high-quality propolis. And it's a special instrument. Key Science has it. It's called, there's a propolis vaporizer.
Okay, Key Science. We'll put the link here. Ashley will find the link, folks.
KI Science. Yeah.
Okay, KI Science. KI Science. And then they sell the propolis cartridges.
They have the little cartridges that go in. They have to be replaced every 10 days. It's about $2 for 10 days. So it's very affordable, and it's a fantastic treatment. So my Lyme treatment starts with that, cleaning up the home from mold and cleaning up the electric environment, and then the next step is, what you give the patient.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that. Right. So I think that's a unique approach already, and I agree with it, because if these other stressors are affecting the person, good luck, right? You're not going to make an impact here. But okay, so then let's talk about what you're giving the patients. One of the things that I can say I've learned is, these critters are smart, right? You have to rotate things. You can't just put someone on this protocol, keep them on the protocol. We have learned that changing things, fooling it, backing it, it'll back into a cyst form, come back out. So talk about your approach now that we're actually giving them something. What do you give them? What are your best finds? Give us your best things that you found, and I'll throw some in myself.
Yeah. So first of all, I treat patients by the theory that the best treatment should always be a combination of three things. The psychological element has to be in the treatment. The second one, some aspect of biophysics, using lasers, using infrared light, using sonotherapy, using vibrational tools and all that. And the third leg is the biochemistry. So it shouldn't be just one, it should be a combination of the three. And so in terms of the psychological work, you probably know I use the family constellation work and some direct one-on-one body biofeedback counseling technique, that I kind of groom to my own needs. It's called psychokinesiology. That's one part. And then in terms of the Lyme, we do like some of the new tools, the Wave 1, I think it's called. It's a device that you put on the wrist, and it shines light into the blood vessels, and the light piggyback on the light, other frequencies.
Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't used it. You're getting good results with it?
Yeah. It just takes about 3 months before you get results. So it's not a sprint that's kind of long distancing, but it works very well. It certainly contributes to the healing of the patient. And then the herbs that we use exclusively herbs that I've extracted really from the literature, herbs that have shown to have effects that are beyond what antibiotics can do. And so the first one, maybe cryptolepsis.
Oh yeah, cryptolepsis. Yeah,
it's been recently shown to be 100% effective for Lyme. I like the rosemary tincture is very high up on our list. Japanese knotweed is probably.
Yeah, I just read that. I mean, there was a great study that was just circulating for a while. And I had read a study about it some years ago. But yeah, it turned out of all the things they tested, including the antibiotics, the Japanese knotweed actually outperformed it. So.
Yeah, and so we've been doing that for 15 years. I've used Japanese knotweed and rosemary tincture and a few other things, but these are the key ones. And the only new thing that appeared on the horizon lately was the work with disulfiram. Disulfiram is a medical drug that's used by alcoholics under the name Antabuse, that was patented in 1830. So it's a very old drug, was used for completely different purposes in the industry, and then found that when alcoholics take it, they get sick from the alcohol, and so it deconditions them, so they start disliking alcohol. It works quite well, and it's an inexpensive drug, and it has been found to be 100% lethal in an in vitro study. So there's always, in vitro always means, okay, that's outside the body. And it's pretty easy to find things that kill things outside the body. But inside the body, the question is always, okay, how high can you go with that item before you kill the patient? And so, so we found, first of all, by making the drug liposomal, that much lower doses reach to the deeper compartments in the body. You know, we always try to reach the limbic system where the hiding the last holdout is of Lyme disease. And so here's how I proceed. We muscle test people on the number of herbs. We got about 10 different herbs, some powders, some tinctures. And then we ask the patient, then we tell them, okay, you should take whatever 2 dropperfuls of Japanese knotweed 3 times a day. And then we have the patient calculate the weekly dose of all of these. So in this case, it would be 6 dropperfuls a day times 7. So 6 times 7, you put that amount in a blender, plus the calculated amounts from the other herbs also in a blender, and then we're adding in some microphosphates, the wonderful, highly tested and micronized forms of smallest liposomal particles. It's a microphosphate. We're adding phospholipids to that in a blender and then blend the hell out of it, maybe with a little bit of water in it. I like to also add a little MCT oil to it. And then
you're basically you're almost making your own liposome by blending it with some.
The individualized liposomal blend of Lyme disease. And with that, we've had over the years fantastic improvements in people. And so what really emerged with that, once we are succeeding with taming the Lyme and the Babesia and the Bartonella, once we have that under control, what really emerges underneath is the layer of all the common viruses, that we're all familiar with, the herpes type 6, the Epstein-Barr,
right?
Everybody talks about. And then people get lost in trying to treat the herpes viruses. Nobody has ever succeeded to treat.
Well, exactly. They're opportunes that it's going to be there and some, hiding.
And so the deeper level to that is the retroviruses. And I've developed a couple of products. One is from KI Science, the powder called Retro V. And here at BioPure, we have a tincture that's very effective. It's called NV, EN, and then V.
NV. I'll have Ashley, we'll put some of these up when we run this for people. They can put the names and we can put that way people aren't scrambling to get the names. So yeah.
And then if you look even deeper, that's when you find a strata of metal toxicology, and most Americans have deep levels of lead in their bones still.
Yeah. You're right.
Definitely my generation, a little bit better in the younger people, but not much better.
Right.
And nobody talks about lead anymore, because
I talk a lot about lead because it's 4 generations inherited. Number one source of lead is actually mom, because it's in the bone. They lose bone during pregnancy. It happened to my children. My wife had massively high lead levels that she got from her mom, who ended up dying of cancer. And my wife was heading down the same road, and we couldn't balance her methylation. Her hormones were off. Anyways, as it turned out, her lead was off the chart. Oh, and then my kids, who were never vaccinated, this healthy life, their lead levels were off the chart. They got it from their mom. So this is a 4-generation problem. It's a big deal.
Yeah. And so we're looking for that very carefully. My treatments for that are pretty simple. We give people a pretty high dose of zinc. Of course, most people have lead toxicity, have KPU, but that's a whole other story. So we give them a dose of zinc and B6. And vitamin B1, it's published as being one of the most effective tools to detox lead. And it's largely forgotten. And we like it because it's also a treatment for the coronavirus. And so there's a good time to do that. Also good treatment for Lyme disease, the combination that we use now of this disulfiram together with some herbs.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, a coronavirus, the flu is a coronavirus. So this is good for the flu period, right? You're talking about, B6, B1, thiamine, zinc.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And so, we give it for the lead detox specifically, but as a side effect, we're protecting people from a whole bunch of viruses. Yeah. And then, but the most nasty metal that is the direct growth factor for Lyme spirochetes is aluminum. There's nanodized aluminum. And, there's been recent studies from Chris Axley, a professor in England, who found extraordinary high levels of aluminum in the brain of autistic people that have died with the illness, extraordinary high aluminum levels. And the same has been reported for decades on the Alzheimer's brain, being extremely high of aluminum. Also mercury, but aluminum is twice as high as mercury in the Alzheimer's brain. And now we're finding Lyme. There's an English lab where we can look inside the mitochondria, and we find that all of our mitochondria are stuffed full with nanoparticles of aluminum. It's a really sad story. And so
I want people to hear one thing, because they're going to run out and they're going to either do a blood test or just a urine test. When this stuff's in the brain, you're not testing it without biopsy here, folks. It's not like you can run this test and go, because my fear is that people run and get a test and say, oh, I checked my metals and they're okay. If it were only so simple, isn't that the truth?
Well, there is the test from France that we have. What's it called? The one on the hand.
We've used them. I still have a skepticism, about all.
No, it's like if you know what you're testing the metals in the fascia of the hand, in the palm of the hand. And the metals in there are like a tattoo. And so when you take a first measurement, it very accurately gives you basically the life history of that patient. And what you will find is in everyone now that aluminum is the highest metal of all of them, then followed by either lead or mercury, and cadmium, barium, all of those. And so, but the technology is very clean that's used. Actually, they use a very simple trick. The instrument, the oligoscan instrument, the actual instrument part, that is the part how metals are determined in your blood. So when you send a urine sample or blood sample in, it's exactly that technology that looks for how much lead is there and what concentration, and they used to simply groom the same instrument to do it measured in the skin rather than in a body fluid. And so it's as reliable as the blood test that we get. But knowing, okay, we're not measuring blood here, we're measuring a particular tissue in the body. And so how representative that is of the rest of the body, well, the symptoms decide that,
Yeah, there's no perfect test, right? Because you're measuring that tissue, but this tissue is a little different. So I always tell people there is no perfect test. We can do testing and get some ideas, but you're right. You can get some ideas, but ultimately, what are the symptoms?
There is a perfect test. It's called ART.
Yeah.
It was our non-invasive brain biopsy, basically, where we
exactly.
Brain and find really out what's in there and what shouldn't be in there and all of that. But anyway, so the chronic infections are hugely on the rise, not because the bugs have gotten bad, but because we're treating them bad.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And from the environmental influences, there's really three. There is the electrosmog, there is the mold, and there is the agrochemicals, that are now everywhere in the air and in the food and in the drinking water. Glyphosate is now the leader in that, because of Stephanie Senner's research. But there is tens of thousands of others, that are in our systems that cross-react with each other and cause trouble. And so, but what in our community falsely have been focused on, what are these things doing to our cells?
Yeah.
And so the new focus now in the more smart people is, what is it doing to the bugs that naturally live in your lung? What is doing to the bugs that naturally live in your sinuses? What is it doing to the bugs that naturally live in your brain? Yeah, every organ has its own microbiome. We know that now. So bugs with foreign DNA that live in our tissues and are hugely important. There's a certain bug that should live in the breast tissue of women. When it's not there, they get breast cancer. Yeah, and so these are all serious issues. And these microbes in us, they're highly, highly sensitive to Wi-Fi.
Oh, I mean, I think you brought up a great point, right? I mean, right now it's very in vogue to do a lot of microbiome testing, whether it's Viome or there's many of these tests right now. What benefit do you think it has? And then I'm going to ask you the same question about SNPs, right? It's also in vogue to do all the genetic testing. How useful do you think both of those types of testing are right now? And I bring those up because they're very in vogue right now, where so many practitioners are doing them.
Yeah, so we know that each species of bugs communicates with every other species of bugs, and they're constantly adjusting their numbers and their activity. And each species has at their hand about 4 or 5 toxic substances they can create when they feel unhappy. And they have 4 or 5 very important biochemical substances that they can shed into us that are hugely helpful for our health. Yeah, so every bug has a possibility to contribute to our health or to take away from it. This is the truth. This is
absolutely
little talked about. And so looking at the microbiome is a nice beginning, but it's sort of like kindergarten, because we do not know if the bugs that we see are happy bugs contributing to us or are unhappy bugs. And so until we get to all the excretion products, all the polypeptides and single peptides and amino acids and sugars that they're producing and immune active substances.
Exactly.
It's really about that. It's not about the number of this or that. But we're far away from that. And
I couldn't agree more. So everyone comes to me, here's my microbiome test. Oh, what does it mean, right? I see very healthy, amazing people with some organisms that I would have said, boy, that's a bad guy. But yet it's working in their microbiome and it's a very happy bug.
There's no such thing as a bad guy.
That's right. It's all part of the microbiome.
The same is really true with the SNPs and the genetic testing. We know that almost for every SNP that you have, you got some backup genes, some other clusters of genes that make up for that. And the truth is none of us would have come forward in evolution if these SNPs really would take away from our ability.
Isn't it that it's so true?
It's so true. They must have given us some evolutionary advantage that we do not understand yet.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, right? So many people with the homozygous MTHFR, they have no problem detoxing. They're very healthy people. It seemed we wanted to put so much emphasis on this, and we had hoped it would lead to all these great treatments. Frankly, we have found clinically it's made no difference, absolutely no difference. And I found that with my group, you found that. So I think it's a big waste of time right now. I mean, maybe 20 years from now, it'll mean more, but you're right. Yeah. The pathways around these SNPs, we haven't even discovered how many there are.
Yeah, so we work with a number of people that try to crack the genome and with a different interpretation, and I'm watchful, waiting. And we'll see. Eventually, there's going to be a couple of good things coming out of it, that people agree on. But I also think we're far away from that still.
I think we're far away from it. And the danger too, Doc, is that now people are running around defining themselves by these things, right? They're running around it, and that's a problem here, right? They classify themselves as this gene or identify themselves as this genome, and so now they're actually strongly creating the very problem. So that's the issue I have with it too. I don't like diagnosing people with genes.
Yeah, for me, the shocking insight is that really life isn't that difficult. There's a couple of toxins in all of us that have to be brought down. There's a couple.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
you and I resonate. Listen, you have gotten a lot of very challenged people well, and so have I. If you said to me, or if you said to you, what's the key? We'd both answer the same. We'd say, you know what? We just got some of these things out of those people, and the body can heal itself, right? That's it. I mean, there's nothing more complicated than that. It's pretty damn simple, actually.
I mean, the wonderful thing is the body is a self-healing
Yes.
system, and really all we have to do is remove some obstacles, and
That's it. That's it.
And it's it's still. I mean, the good thing is it's still possible to be healthy in this time, but it's getting increasingly difficult. The challenges are in front of us. And
Doc, one of the things I say, the perfect diet today won't get you well. You may not get well without the perfect diet, but meaning that it's a deeper issue today, right? It's a lot of these toxins and infections.
I like to say that here towards the end of our talk. I do think, I created this tool, autonomic response testing, and that has guided us way into the future and shown us, where we need to look, what we need to know, what products to use, and so on. I think I really like to give that to people. It's not like there's other people teaching it. Autonomic response testing is a wonderful tool to be able to navigate these difficult times. And with the coronavirus now, we don't know what is groomed to do. We don't know what the intent is, if there is any, whether it's escaped from a lab or whether it's intentionally seeded out, whether it is just to force us into agreeing to get vaccinated,
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things to...
So we'll see how that evolves. We already had some warnings from high up places, that we should not even dare to announce that we have a cure for it. That
be in big trouble.
Immediately be in big trouble. So we got a very high up place. In fact, very high up place. And so we will need to see how it unfolds, but we are glad that even with long distance testing, which we've developed, we have a biocomputer that can crack the voice code of patients. And so we've already treated the first coronavirus victims very successfully, older people, by just using the ART technique. And so it's a technique. For me, it has taken my fear away. We have a tool where we can find out what's going on, and we don't depend on any laboratory, on any instrument to do that with. And so it's just something I wanted to speak out. I know we have to deal with the destruction of the atmosphere, with the chemtrails and other and nuclear radiation that has really, really stripped the ozone layer in far worse ways than people know, and discombobulated our atmosphere. That's where the real big stuff is right now, and the pollution of our food chain, the pollution of all the bodies of water. We have serious problems coming up. And it's not going to be like that, it's going to culminate in 15, 20 years. This is in 5-6 years, we're going to hit like a real barrier to going forward with humanity and with the life of all higher mammals on the planet. Going to be in jeopardy. And whether we collectively going to be intelligent and move forward, or whether we croak from it, then it is not decided yet. But I do think reasonable people need a tool that's a bit more reliable than a pendulum to navigate their way through these next few years.
So how do they access your tool?
My company, my teaching company, is called Klinghardt Institute, and Klinghardt spelled with the DT in the middle. So Klinghardt Institute is the authoritative, approved by me website, also where we have a lot of informational material. And so maybe let me sum up a little bit more, the crisis of Lyme disease is really linked directly to the growth of Wi-Fi and to the increased pollution in the atmosphere and the pollution of our food chain, especially glyphosate, which lingers in our gut for decades.
Absolutely.
Once we have it, and in the US, even 80% of the organic food is full of glyphosate, which is shocking.
Yeah.
And so basically, there is no more clean food left in the country, and you need to know that. And so you need to have a strategy on board to deal with that.
No,
and so,
I agree.
And the illnesses that we see now, the chronic fatigue, the myalgia, the encephalopathies, the population is so rapidly getting ill that in a few years, 3-4 years, everybody will have a list of symptoms and a list of diagnoses. And yet stepping out of that, getting back, regaining your health is not that big a deal. I'm 70 years old now, and I'm looking back at the ups and downs of life and the different phases of illnesses that I was watching as a practitioner. In the 80s, it was all about Candida.
Yeah.
In the 90s, it was all about the viruses. And then the turn of the century came Lyme disease.
Yeah.
And then came SARS and then came the push where the vaccines got more and more toxic as an added thing that we had to deal with.
Yeah, there's a lot to deal with, right? I mean, there is.
And I know that you've taken some leadership in the detox area, in creating protocols that are doable for people. And, I've taken some leadership in coming up with pharmaceutical treatments for the chronic infections, and we do very well with that. With the coronavirus now, it's for us, of course, a huge opportunity also. It's not just, we feel sorry about the patients that don't dare to travel now because they're so spooked. And they are sitting at home often suffering, and we can't, help them beyond a certain degree. But we're in an exciting time. It's humanity is sort of committing collective suicide on one level, and on the other level, there is enough of us that are finding ways out and finding out to support and sustain life until hopefully the forces that are behind the powers that we see will see the stupidity and the arrogance and the destructiveness of what they're doing, and change course. We need to see, but we need tools, and you've developed a number of tools. I have a number of tools. There's many good people out there that are offering accurate advice right now, and I'd like to leave it there right now.
Yeah, no, exactly. I agree. There's hope. You and I have dedicated our lives to this because right now, you're right. There's so much that is affecting people. But it's ironic because you and I resonate on the simplicity of getting people's lives back. The complexity is, how they're really affecting us with so many of these chemicals unknowingly to people, right? Through glyphosate, which sprayed on our food and now on the rain and affecting every bit of our food, and unknowingly in vaccines and everything. And, so many of these exposures today. But yet, if we remove the interference, the body can heal. And we have both witnessed that. So therein lies the hope. I agree. There's some great research and discoveries right now amongst all of the chaos. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. This is great to hear some of the things that you're doing, and you and I have to get more. We have to have our teams have to get us united more so we can share things, more and more things with each other. I'd love to come on one of my doctor calls. I have a group of doctors we train, that I train, and we train together. And so I'd love to have you on that and share as well. But thank you for being on. I appreciate you, Dr. Klinghardt.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks again. Hey, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Cyto Detox. Look, podcasts cost money. There's a lot of production going around this, but we are grateful to have CytoDetox as one of the sponsors. It's so easy for me to talk about the product because myself and my family use it constantly as we practice what I preach. For over 15 years, I've talked about and taught doctors and the public about cellular detox. And I'll tell you, Cyto was a breakthrough. Cyto was a breakthrough for us. And it's changed so many lives. So we're grateful that they sponsor Cellular Healing TV. It makes sense, doesn't it? They should.
If you're listening to this podcast and want to access the amazing Cyto Detox product Dr. Pompa just mentioned, please visit detoxoffer.com. Again, that's detoxoffer.com. Well, that's it for this week. The materials and content within this podcast are intended as general information only and are not to be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you would like to purchase some of the supplements mentioned on this show, please visit the site as seen on CHTV.com and use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. Again, that's as seen on CHTV.com. Use the code CHTV15 for 15% off. And as always, thanks for listening.